Well, today we are going to do a showcase on Web3 DevDoc, who has a real name, and it's Dr. Zach Steelman. So Zach made this incredible plugin. He's going to take us through it today, kind of his build process, why he made it, what it does, how you can install it, and all that good stuff. So I kind of want to start with a little bit of background on you, Zach, because I know that you are a professor, right? Can you tell us what you teach and where?
Yeah, so I'm at the University of Arkansas. Been there since 2017. I actually did my PhD there as well. I worked at Oklahoma State for a few years and then came back to Arkansas and started our Blockchain Center of Excellence. So I've been teaching blockchain and Web3 courses for the last 5 years and web development for probably 10 years in different capacities, usually in a business school. So a lot of my projects are how can I dumb it down as easy as possible and remove as much code as possible. And that's kind of what this project kind of turned into was for my students. But yeah, here in Northwest Arkansas, hopefully can get some of the Bildr crew out to Northwest Arkansas soon. We've got some ideas for some things, but lots of cool stuff coming.
That would be super fun. And I love this. I think it's so amazing that you've already been teaching Web3 and that whole world for 5 years, did you say?
Yeah, since 2017, and I've been investing since 2013. We've got some really cool faculty in the department. Mm-hmm. One of our faculty members was actually the 10th Bitcoin miner. So he's been doing this since 2009, 2010, cashed out very well in 2014, and he's just been having fun ever since.
I love that. Who knew that Arkansas was such a gold mine for like Web3 minds and experience. That is so cool. So tell us a little bit about your plugin. I know that everyone is like builders here, so they're probably really going to want to know, like, why did you start building this? Where'd the inspiration come from? And what was your approach?
Okay, so to kind of give everybody a background, we run a hackathon every year. So I teach our graduate program, and I usually have 40 to 50 graduate students come through in a 1-year accelerated program to learn Web3 and blockchain. And really, you have to kind of go through a full tech stack to do that, right? There's the blockchain component, but there's also all the front end stuff, which is traditionally web development right now. Most of my students do not have a technical background. It's about a 50-50 of prior programmers, which they jump in very fast. But the other half of my students are prior teachers, psychology, business majors. They have no technical skills whatsoever. So I have to kind of start from scratch. And so I'm going through all these different technologies each semester and trying to find what works best and where the roadblocks are to get them started. And I found that the blockchain part is not the difficult part for people. It's jumping into and connecting everything together. That's the difficult part that people struggle with, is now that you have this blockchain database, what can I do with it? What can I connect it to? And so a lot of my students were struggling trying to get this integrated into a website. So I've been using an SDK called Web3.js, which is the most popular right now to connect to any of the Ethereum-based blockchains. You could also use ethers.js and more coming out. But it's not something that if you're not a JavaScript programmer, it's not super easy to understand what all's going on, how to use it. And one of the interesting things about it is, regardless of what smart contract you talk to, the code remains the same for all of them. So I was thinking, well, there's got to be a way to automate this, because if you go to, if any of you have used Remix, for instance, the browser IDE, whenever you deploy a smart contract, it automatically gives you all the UI on the left to interact with that smart contract. Or if you go to Etherscan and look at any of the smart contracts, all the UI to read and write to that smart contract is already out there. So there's ways to automate it. And I was thinking, well, there's got to be a way to kind of dump this into a system somewhere where my students can just write the smart contract and then have some kind of UI to kind of develop that. And so started looking around for some no-code products, and I tried probably 20 of them last year, just trying to get Web3.js embedded into the system. And Bildr was the first one that allowed me to do it quickly without any headache. It was boom, drop this header in. I was ready to go. I could do whatever I needed. I've done a lot of work with Bubble, and I actually know the guy that has written most of the Web3 plugins on Bubble. He's looking to move off of Bubble as well, just because it's a pain to develop inside of. So I shared some of this stuff with him. But what I ended up doing is I always start with sketches. I use this as a project for my class. So my students build every semester and I build a project along with them. So as we go through each week, I'm doing the same things that they're doing with my own project. And this spring, I decided to try to build this kind of website that would automate this code development for them. Initially, it wasn't planning to just drop into Bildr, but as I explored more of Bildr, I found a way to incorporate that in. And so I always start with sketches. I had sketched some of this stuff out. I sat down with friends and was like, hey, what do we need? What are the things that it needs to do? Started with some sketches and just started throwing stuff onto a page and this was more for a project for me to figure out Bildr and how it works and what worked best and what didn't. Every time I get on here, you guys show me a better way to do something. So I'm consistently doing something the hard way, more than likely. But it gave me a chance to really dive in and figure out what Bildr was doing. And I built things in a very piecemeal manner. So I started with, here's the web page and nothing's connected. And then I was like, okay, I need to do one thing. How do I read in this contract ABI? And I just kind of broke down my list that I was working with. And every couple of days, I'd jump on and try to build something extra and share it with some people. And initially in the spring, at about March, I had gotten to the point where I could copy out a contract API from either Scan or from my smart contract, dump it in, and it would generate all of the JSON and JavaScript to create a new function inside of Bildr. I hadn't figured out how to inject action types yet, but I knew the first step was if I could remove the process of writing JavaScript for my students, I could at least get them to connect all the buttons together and the inputs and things like that. So I started with that piece and got that to work, and I gave it to them for our hackathon we had in March. And I had about 40 students use it during the hackathon. Some of the projects actually used Bildr entirely for their project and finished everything. But I use that as feedback. So I get 50 students every year to really kind of test all this software and figure out what works and what didn't. So I took that feedback and they realized like the biggest struggle was them taking and combining the functions into an action type. That concept wasn't clicking to them of what the differences were between the functions and the action types that they were using. And I was still kind of wrapping my head around it in some aspects when I finally realized that, okay, the functions are just a wrapped JavaScript function. Here's the inputs, outputs, that's a very simple component that's inside of that. And then the action types are really the UI of the user inputs and the chain of actions that were there. So the first round of times I did this, I had created a bunch of kind of mini helper functions and then was chaining them together in an action type. And I documented all this in a PDF and I kind of put it out on my website and the students were using it, but they kept messing it up. They were putting it in the wrong order. They would change something and have to go back and recreate the action type. And they were struggling with that part. And then as we've started playing around with some of this in the community of just kind of seeing all the other things you can do in Bildr, Unix kind of figured out how, let's just inject the action type. So we could inject in the elements, we can inject the action type just as easily. And so kind of working from some of his code, I was able to modify this. After looking, I had to look at a bunch of action types that were already created and understand what is the data that Bildr's using. Once I figured that out, I was able to automate that process and inject action types into this. So now my plugin will allow you to grab a contract ABI from any smart contract that is out there, whether it's on Ethereum, Polygon, Syscoin, any Ethereum-based smart contract, dump it in. It will create all the code for you and inject it directly into Bildr. Absolutely no code whatsoever. You never have to look at the code as long as you know how to read kind of the user inputs on what it's asking for or what the smart contract is bringing back. It's going to save all this stuff into variables. And I think it's really going to make it easier for people to actually start interacting with some of these smart contracts for some of this stuff. But I think it'll be best if I just kind of show you what I have. I can show you the different pieces and what I built. And then if you guys have any questions, just holler at me, stop me wherever you need to.
Yeah, that sounds great. I'll let you know. I'll watch the chat here. Y'all can just unmute yourselves and ask Zach. But if you have something you want to ask, you can also just chat it and I'll let him know.
Okay, so you can get to the current version of the plugin at, well, I thought I had it pulled open here. It's builder.web3devdoc.com. And so this will be the most active version of the plugin. I do have some demo versions we're still working on, but the most current version will always point here to builder.web3devdoc.com. And it may look a little different than what you may have seen previously. Every time I come back to this, I keep trying to figure out how can I remove instructions? How can I remove steps? How can I make this less cognitive for the user? So right now, you go to this website the first time, and it will tell you two plugin or two headers to include inside of the Bildr Studio. And you can do that. I have one that's opened here. I have a demo that I'll kind of show everybody, but to install this, all you have to do is create two new page headers. I have one for the toolkit, which will actually load the plugin itself. And then I have another one for web3.js. Because all of this is done with web3.js, it needs to be injected. This actually does get injected by the Bildr Studio occasionally. So if I'm logged in with my MetaMask and it detects it, it's already injected in the Studio, but I do have this in case it doesn't inject for those that don't have the Studio Pass. Soon, this will be injected as well. So we've also figured out a way to inject page headers automatically into the system so that you won't have to do this step either as you're working on it. And the only thing that you really have to do to use this plugin, once it's kind of set up and installed by putting the headers, the current version, you will see, let's see if I can move this, a little icon in the lower right-hand corner that says W3DD. And when you click on that, it will load the toolkit here on the right side. This is the exact same page that we just saw at builder.web3devdoc.com. And so you can see all the same information. But to use this, you can give it a contract nickname. And so I recommend that you do this when you're testing it so that you're not just injecting a bunch of action types that you don't know what they go to. So for instance, if I want to use the Bildr, I think I have it saved right over here. I have all of the contract ABI from the Bildr smart contract for the Studio NFTs. So Drew sent me that. All I have to do is paste this into this location and click generate actions. And it will read through that and generate the code for every function that is inside of that smart contract. Now, currently, the smart contracts have both functions, which are things you can interact with, you can read or write from the blockchain. They also have events. Events are monitored so that anytime something happens on the blockchain, that you can actually get an alert or integrate it into your web page. Currently, that's not running yet, but I do have a demo that I just need to kind of fix a few bugs. And then that will be included as well so that you can create a WebSocket directly to the smart contract that you're watching. And as soon as a transaction runs on that smart contract, you will get an alert into your page and it will automatically feed. The same way that you might see on Etherscan or on OpenSea as it's loading the most current transactions, you can have a live feed like that from the smart contract. What it does is it will show you the JavaScript, which most of you won't need to look at. You can't edit it in this. I was just kind of seeing what all was there. But you can kind of see it needs both the JavaScript of how to run it, as well as the JSON. And if you click add action to Bildr, it will inject that action as the nickname dash and then the name of that. And so inside of that action type, it will have some instructions. So it has a name and a display name. All of this stuff can be edited once it's inside of Bildr in your own project. This is just default stuff. It injects a short description. It lets you know what the contract ABI was just for that function so that you can remember what all is it asking for, what are the data types that are coming back inside of that. I've got a couple custom tags that are on there. These don't show up in the Bildr Studio, but they will now that mine's injected in the projects. And then for any of the arguments that come in, so this function specifically has two inputs. You need to know the contract address you're talking to and the network that you want to run it on, right? Is it mainnet or a test net? And then it has one output. So I've kind of automated this so any outputs coming back from the function have output underscore and the data type that's there or the name if they gave it. One of the things that I noticed is that most smart contract developers do not put names inside of their smart contract, more so that malicious actors can't try to manipulate and figure out what that smart contract is doing as easily. So some of these you can go in and rename yourself if you want to change exactly what it is once it's injected. And then it has the function that got automated that was tied to it. And all of the function inputs are automatically configured as well. So everything is set up, connected, ready to go. You can look at the functions and edit it if you want to. So it's got the same function that's there. You can see the JavaScript code that got generated. And this JavaScript, I'll continue to add some features to it. I know that the ones that the Bildr team have built have, on success, run this action flow, on failure, run this action flow. So I've already started taking some of that and incorporating that into the next revision of this, because it would be nice if all of these functions matched what you guys are building as well. So there's just a nice transition between my smart contract versus using a generic one as well. So all of this code is ready to go, and you can use it just by adding anything in there. So let me show you kind of a demo of a smart contract that I've used. Let's see here. Let me check the chat, make sure nobody's got anything. Okay. So I created a really simple example. I always like to do a hello world. Anytime I'm doing any programming environment, it's an easy input output example. So I created this really simple page here to show you how it's used, and then I'll show you how I kind of built the project itself. So on this page, I've got a nice simple hello world. I will refresh it here and I'll show it working. I can connect to the wallet using the default wallet action from Bildr. So that saves my wallet address into a variable that I can reuse. Right now I am connected to the mainnet. So let me change over to Rochton. Eventually this will be set up so that if the page is designated to be on a certain network, it will ask the user to switch to that network. And again, you guys have built some of that functionality already into your own action types. So I'll kind of take some of the same code and incorporate it here. But I can get the message and it will read that message directly from the blockchain. I can set that message just as easily. I can set message, it will pop up MetaMask and ask me to confirm that message. And as I get this plugin built a little bit further, I'll have, again, the on success, what should it do? It should probably update this label, right, after it's ran again. But if I run get message again, you can see that it's now live there on the blockchain. So functionally, it works very straightforward to kind of add these in. And from a demo perspective, I can show here, I've got basically just a few examples. So I have two functions in this. So I have vMessage, which is just reading from the blockchain. And then I have update message, which is sending some information. And what I did is I created a simple button. I made a new action flow. And inside of that, I ran this action, vMessage. What's nice about the contract, the name that you can add over here is it allows you to actually search this a lot easier, which becomes very important. I'll dump in OpenSea here in a minute, and it has 50 or 60 different functions that are in it, and it can really fill up your project very quickly if you're not wanting to use all of them. I do have an add all actions at once button. I don't recommend it because you probably don't need all of those functions right away until you get used to it. But you can add these messages inside of it. It will automatically ask you for the inputs and outputs. And the way that I set this up is it could either be raw text or it could come from an element or a variable. I could easily add all of these other options as well from data collections and from other things that are in the full list for the other action types. But I feel like these three are the ones that I've used the most and that I've seen others use the most primarily. But right now I have an output string, which is going to be the variable coming back. And so this is where it gets a little confusing for some of these smart contracts. When they don't name what the variable is, you end up having to just know what the smart contract is doing. So the message is going to return a string into a variable called the message variable. So this is just going to be whatever variable I want to call it. I can also set it to a variable that already exists, or I could set it directly to an element. So instead of saving it in a variable, I could just put it straight on the screen. you always need to know the contract address that you're talking to and then the network. Right now I'm connected to Robson. It could be mainnet. I know that in some places people like to connect with a chain ID. So in the Ethereum space, there's two ways to connect to the network. You can either say, I'm connecting to the network called mainnet, which is Ethereum, or Ropsten, which is their test net for Ethereum, or Matic, which would be the Polygon network. And so they have specific names that you can use, but you can also use a chain ID, 1, 2, 3, whatever. Those tend to be easier to know consistently on typos. I will automate that process again. That's one of my, on my feature list, to add a drop-down list for all of the known networks so that users don't have to know the chain ID of what they're trying to connect to. So that's all you have to do to use this function. Just know the inputs and outputs. And then after that, I have it taking that variable, the message variable, and setting it to an element's value, just kind of updating this message piece here. The set message is similar. It has the same kind of inputs and outputs. It needs to know the input message. So that came, in this case, from an element value. So my text box here, it could come from a variable or it could be text. You need the network address and the what you're connecting to. And then also you need to know, see if I can move this out of the way somewhere. There we go. You need to know the wallet address. Anytime someone is interacting with your smart contract, you need to know who it is. And so I actually have this tied to the MetaMask wallet variable that's created when I connect to a wallet. I could hard code this. I could ask them to put this in there. It could be from anything. But as I've been playing around with it, I'm getting better at connecting input boxes to my outputs, to my action types. And that's still just getting comfortable for me. But what's interesting with this is I found that the more that I play with it, the more that I explore it. So for instance, a lot of you may be interested in playing around with OpenSea, or if you've bought NFTs on OpenSea, you can actually go to their smart contract. So this is their address for their Seaport contract, which is their most recent one. And typically on Etherscan, if you go to contract tab and there's this little green check mark, it means they've included all the source code so that you can see everything that's inside of that smart contract, how to interact with it as you're going through. And if you scroll down to the bottom, you can find that contract ABI typically down here at the bottom. So I'm just going to copy this and I will dump it back into here. That's not right. I didn't copy that. Let's see here. Copy this. So I'll dump it in here. I'm going to call this OpenSea and I'm going to generate the actions. And if I scroll down, I now have the cancel action, fulfill advanced order, everything that's inside of that smart contract, I could get an action type for without having to write any of that code. So if I wanted to create my own OpenSea marketplace that's on my personal website to sell my NFTs instead of having people go to OpenSea and see millions of NFTs. So think of maybe like a smaller version of that NFT market. I can connect directly to this. I actually had a student that went through and was using this to create a website that aggregated Rarible, OpenSea, and a few others all onto one web page so that he could track one specific NFT collection across all of the markets and not have to open up a whole bunch of different tabs. Everything was on one page. But I want to show you what it looks like when you inject everything. If I click add all actions to Bildr, nothing pops up yet. I'll add some alerts and things, so just so a user knows what's going on. But I now have in my action types, maybe. Here we go. All of the OpenSea functions. And as long as I know the OpenSea smart contract, I can connect and run any of these functions. What I've found that's interesting, and I'm creating in this next version, for a lot of these smart contracts that are going to be used across different places, so whether that's Uniswap or PancakeSwap or OpenSea or Rarible, these very well-known smart contracts that we interact with, other people may want to work directly with those smart contracts as well. So what's interesting is I could actually manually code the address for OpenSea, I can add this in and I have it set up as an option so that it will hard code that address into it so that we can create OpenSea action types and then dump them all onto the marketplace. And then anyone that wants to read or write anything to OpenSea can grab those from the marketplace without having to know the contract address, the network, how it's configured. They just know they want to talk to OpenSea. So we can create verified action types for all of these popular smart contracts that are already out there, and make those easily available for anybody that wants to develop on top of that. I've already created a few for some of the contracts like ERC20s, ERC721s, and ERC1155. So the token use cases and the NFTs, those will be used a lot. But if anybody has some interesting smart contracts you want me to test this with and explore, I'm more than happy to. But the reason I say don't necessarily click add all unless you're ready for it is because some of these have a lot, and it can really dump a bunch in there. And the current version, if I inject this again, it will add duplicates of everything back into the contract as well. So as this loads, I'll probably get, so now I have 3 versions of cancel, right? And this just makes it kind of complicated. So eventually we'll work with checking to see if it's already inside of your project before we inject it so that it doesn't overwrite something or it doesn't update something it doesn't need to. And so what I would ask is if any of you play around with this, try to break it, figure out what works, what doesn't work. Let me know. I'm happy to kind of add things. My feature list is getting long. So this next update will be pretty significant. Currently, it looks like this. So this is my very simple page inside of Bildr. It's one page, and I've got a demo page to just test a bunch of buttons as I was building through it. The next version, though, will look really interesting when the plugins start to come out. Let me move this out of the way again. Right now, it shows up as Web3 DevDoc down here in the corner, but soon, probably within the next week or so, you will actually be able to use the community plugins, which we haven't really showed yet, which looks phenomenal, which will allow you to open up the toolkit this way and have the same toolkit and not have to inject any headers or do anything. As long as you drop in one plugin header, you're going to get access to all of the plugins that have been developed. So you can see the marketplace on there as well, or the toolkit, which has been pretty fun to kind of take all of these plugins, figure out, okay, how can we make it a little bit better? What's the next evolution of this? What's the next thing that we can plug in as it goes through? So I have to make a couple tweaks to get this to work. I got to change a few things in my code, but this will be working soon and will be released hopefully, and then hopefully have another kind of showcase of the community plugin, because there's a ton that goes into that. But what I would recommend, if anybody wants to play with it, to find any kind of smart contract, you could do that with the Bildr smart contract. I'm happy to also share this with anyone if you want to be a collaborator and just see how I have it configured or look at it. This is just a demo project that I created. But one of the things I noticed when I was building it, this is what version 1 looked like. So again, very crappy version. It had just had text. It had an automated JavaScript in the back end for some things. And it used to have a whole bunch of instructions to tell the students what to do, and they still messed it up. So the current version now has no instructions other than add this to the header page and then click this button. The next evolution will not have any of this. It will simply say, copy your smart contract ABI, generate the actions, and it will shoot it all into them. I've got a couple more updates where I would love to be able to read directly from OpenSea and pull out that smart contract ABI. So even people that don't understand what the contract ABI is, if they know the smart contract they want to talk to and they know the Etherscan address, it could automatically pull that in as well. So I have some new kind of updates that'll look at that. The UI will change significantly. Right now, it kind of slides out from the side, but I've actually been playing around with some glassomorphic design, and it will actually kind of float and just kind of stay there pinned for a little bit. But again, those are all just small tweaks as I figure out what works best and what doesn't. But the code got really messy on my end. I did this in steps. So I'll show you kind of how I built it. I have one action type that does everything. And I input it, the contract ABI, wallet address, and the contract name. This is just what's on the page. But then I had to write all of these functions separately as I was working through it. So I started off splitting the ABI, learning some of the JSON stuff. Then I generated some Bildr JavaScript and then some JSON. Then I had to convert the ABI into Bildr format to inject it in there. And then I had to actually create the action types for that. And this works great once you get comfortable inside of this. But now I quickly realized that I could take all 5 of these functions and put them into one single function and make it a lot easier for me to update my code. Because I was going in and making a couple of changes in the Bildr function and the JSON function and the convert ABI as I was adding features. And I was having to go into each of these and I'd copy and paste something here, and then I'd copy and paste something here. And I quickly realized that I had copy and pasted JSON in the JavaScript and vice versa a few times, and actually lost some of the code that I was working on because I just wasn't pasting well. So now I've got a better workflow building through this. So it's been a good learning experience for some of it. But in the future, I'm more of a traditional developer. So I actually write a lot of my code in VS Code. I test it there. I've actually got another plugin that I've started playing around with that is almost a pro code environment for Bildr that takes this function section here. So instead of looking at any function like this, it actually recreates this entire window and has all 3 of these tabs loaded at the same time, and also does some other things inside of it so that the JSON changes as I write code, the JavaScript changes as I write code, instead of this coming in and out. For me, I would love to be able to pin this and it stay on the screen and jump over to something else. That's what I probably spent more time on, was just back and forth in the UI, but now I kind of know how it works. But all of that is tied to one action, just splitting the ABI and then running a couple small JavaScript things. I was very surprised with, once I got comfortable in Bildr, how fast the other updates actually went through some of this. So I would love for all of you to test it out, play around with it. We're going to continue to add more features to it. Right now it does web3.js, but if you want me to add ethers.js, I'm happy to do that. I know there are also a few people in the Discord that were asking about Solana. So I actually, next month, will be working with the Solana SDK to try to do the same thing with that. Because there's not plugins on any of the no-code platforms for Solana right now. And so my goal for the next 6 months is to take any of these Web3 specific SDKs like ThirdWeb or Alchemy, and create action types and code for those. Now that we have the marketplace, I can write that and push it out to the marketplace, and everybody can hopefully use it pretty easily.
Zach, this is incredible. I think probably the reason why no one's really asked questions is because we're like digesting how did you even do this? This is incredible. So we do have a question from Bam Bam, but I would love for people to just give you feedback. Like, let's open up the floor. What do you guys think about this? Talk.
Yeah, let me stop my share here, but feel free to ask any questions.
Yeah, I think this is pretty crazy, like what people need, because everyone comes in with a custom smart contract and then they struggle trying to adjust our actions in, and this is like exactly what people need. But really impressive for sure.
Thank you. Yeah, there's every time I use it, there's more features that I notice that I want to add in. And as I see you guys build stuff, and kind of how to kind of map that, I'll start adding that back into the features for things. I've also been kind of just monitoring more of the other areas of what are best practices for this, because with the blockchain stuff, nothing happens instantly. It's always a wait, right? There's always something, and that hinders a lot of the processes. But as soon as I kind of get that action flow set up, I think it's going to match pretty well to everything else as it goes through. I have, again, 50 students this fall that will all be testing it every week. So it will hopefully get updated fairly quickly. But they actually will be building projects in the fall. And some of them have said they want to actually build plugins. So hopefully I have maybe 10 or so of them to build more plugins or update this plugin or add new features inside of this. Because I really feel like the best way to get into this space is to just build something and put it out there. You know, there's no competitive edge to this. It's just automating web3.js for me. I mean, the code is all out there in their documentations. But the more people I can get building in this, the more cool things we can get out of Web3. Because this is just the connector piece, right? Once that's eliminated, then anybody can really build with this.
Yeah, my immediate thought is, how do we make it easier for more people to make more plugins? That's my immediate thought. I want more and more and more of this. It's awesome.
Yeah, we've got a bunch of ideas too. I don't know about you guys. I keep a journal just for dev stuff. So this is the 4th one for just Web3 dev stuff. And I just flip through, you know, and I'll write something down. I'll see somebody do something like, oh, I can make a plugin for that, or I can do that. I've got a huge list that as soon as my students get to class this fall, they've got options to pick from already. I've already kind of done the background research on what they can build. So hopefully they can ramp up on that pretty quickly.
Yeah, that's really cool. I mean, even the question earlier from George asking about, you know, how do I normalize duplicate styles? Like, that's a feature we want to build, but it can also just easily be a plugin. You know, there's so many things like that that we want to do in the studio, but prioritization is primarily on the core, right? Like, we need to make sure we're optimizing the core and making sure that that's expanding out to like the static things we want to do and all the other pieces we want to do. I think plugins are the way to, you know, really make that go faster. And the community is usually better, in my opinion, than the platform at figuring out long-term what these things need to be. And so I'm super excited to open that up. I know Junix and Dorian and Drew and I and Web3 Dev Doc, Zach, you know, we've all been talking about this for a little while. So we've got some good plans coming. I'm excited about it.
Yeah. Does
yeah,
anyone
the biggest
have...
one for
Go
me,
ahead.
I was gonna say the biggest one for me is a lot of my students use Figma. And I played around with a few Figma to HTML and CSS formats. Doesn't always work. Sometimes it does for some of those things. But I've been playing around with it more. And the more that I've kind of dove into the JavaScript or the JSON inside of Bildr, I think I've got a really innovative way to take any website, import it in, it will read it as an element tree, and then identify any of those elements tags inside of the source code that Bildr has a native action for, convert it to a native action. But if it doesn't have one, then just leave it as raw HTML, and I can inject that into my universal element that I created. And that universal element can have nesting inside of it, so that it would end up, you bring in the file, copy and paste the template, and then it would automatically select all of the things that Bildr has something for that I could connect buttons to and make changes for without having to modify the look necessarily. Because I think that's what a lot of my students struggle with as well. I'm a horrible UI designer. I'd much rather work from a template first and then import something in. And so I've been playing around with that one. That's probably what I'll work on most of this fall. I can get a template from Figma or something like that directly imported in, even if it's a simple template, right? Because they can get really fancy for some things. But some kind of path for that, then I think it would really ramp things up quickly.
Yeah, I love that. No, that also plays well with some of the first couple of bounties that we haven't really talked about too much. That these are some UI kits that we're writing documentation around. Same concept though. It's like that's a barrier to getting started, right? It's like, you know, just having to think through the classes and the organization and the styling, unless that's what you love to do, which I only know a couple people that's what they love to do. Usually it's like hard to be the builder and the designer. But yeah, I totally agree with that. Anything that we can do to automate those steps would be amazing.
Excellent. So Zach, we do have a few questions. I think if I scroll up, there's one that's asking if it's possible to open source something like this from Bildr. I'm not sure if that's a question for Zach or for the Bildr team.
Yeah, so I plan to give all this code away. I'm going to have it all hosted on GitHub once I get it cleaned up and kind of ready in different versions. Because like I said, there's no competitive advantage for this for me. It was more just kind of a learning process. But we've actually, I think, figured out a way to using the Bildr JSON, the same way that we've injected things in, we can read things out of Bildr as well, pretty easily. That one of the things on my list is a GitHub plugin. The API is pretty straightforward with GitHub. And so after we've played around with some of this, I really think it's going to be pretty possible to take all of the JavaScript functions or the entire Bildr object. So Unix kind of showed me where all the JSON was, and there's a ton of stuff in there that could instantly be dumped out to GitHub pretty easily with a click of a button, which I think would be pretty easy to do. It would be a nice feature as well, because I have messed up the plugin a few times just by copying and pasting rocks and doing everything in one project version necessarily. So some of it's kind of a process for me.
Yeah, I know Fraser has asked for that kind of functionality for a while, and we want it. I mean, we expose it all in the studio and we use it all in that way. You know, we expose all that JSON intentionally, right? I mean, when we started building Bildr with Bildr, the only way to do that was you have the core that can render, but it's rendering from JSON, but you don't have a platform to write the JSON yet. So we're just writing JSON all day. Like that was what we did for like months, just to build out the initial pages that could then create that JSON structure. So yeah, that's definitely our intent too. I'd love to see something like that as well, where, you know, just take the whole repository just store it in a repository, basically. Like here's the entire backed up version of everything you've got. There's actually also, we don't expose it yet in a UI, but there's actually also a history container that is every change ever made inside your Bildr project to every single thing. And it's accessible within the studio if you're signed in. So that could also be dumped if you really wanted to take a full backup. You can get everything. It's huge though, because it's literally every change and it's stored in a blob. It's massive.
Interesting.
So, anyways,
I would love
it's
to see
all
that,
there
'cause I
and
always,
available.
the video playback on some of the other software that I've used to just see what is everything that I've done is always a really interesting kind of view to see that. And you really get to see how many times I mess up in a project as I'm running through something. But yeah, the fact that everything's exposed in Bildr, I think really has opened it up that plugins will be super simple once we just kind of figure out what's best practices. Because I think that's some of it. We've tried different things and getting it to work. But once we come down with some best practices, I think it'll go pretty quickly. And like I said, I have students that'll be happy to help and test things out this fall and see what they can build.
That's awesome.
Jeroen,
Yeah.
did you have something you wanted to share? Sorry, Mark.
No, I was sort of thinking about the JSON. I did a dump of the JSON, but there's some recursion in it, so it needs some smartness to enter recursion in the right place. But yeah, it's massive. It's massive. I tried to get a JSON out to do some automated testing, and well, succeeded halfway. Yeah.
It gets big fast for sure. You'd be shocked at how big some of these containers are. You know, every Bildr project is its own container of data. So like they're all separated logically, but inside of there, they're just massive. It gets big very, very fast.
Excellent. I think we had
Yeah.
a few other questions for Zach before we move over to help y'all troubleshoot some things. Let me see here. I mean, the feedback is amazing. I love reading how everyone's mind is blown by what you made, Zach. Let's see. Vladin's got a question. Are you able to see that, Zach? About
Yeah, let's see. Will there be DeFi type integrations? Yeah, so I've actually done the Uniswap one already. I've done Pancake Swap. Anything that has a smart contract, you'll be able to drop in. What's interesting is right now, if you use MetaMask to connect to any of your smart contracts, it limits you to only talking to one network at a time because you have to select that drop down in MetaMask. But I'm actually working with a way where we could hard code the RPC to connect so that I could be connected to multiple different blockchains at once and have a dashboard that shows here's Solana information, here's Polygon, here's whatever, by just going directly to Invura or directly through Alchemy instead of having a user log on. One of the things that I've noticed on like the Web3 mint page for Bildr is if I go to the Bildr page and I'm logged into Polygon, it never loads how many NFTs have actually been there because it's not on Polygon, right? I have to flip over to mainnet to see that. But if that was hard coded to instead look directly at the Infura RPC instead of bouncing through MetaMasks first, it would load no matter what network I was connected to. So there's all these different kind of user experiences that I'm kind of playing around with. I want to give options inside of it because some things work good for people, some things don't. So if you see anything you want me to add, just let me know. But the DeFi stuff you can definitely do now with that.
Awesome. Great. Okay, any remaining questions for Zach? And then Zach, for anyone who might have something they're a little shy to ask right now, is there a way that they can reach out to you, or if they have questions or find something as they're testing through the plugin?
Absolutely. So you can reach me pretty easy on the Discord, Web3DevDoc. You could email me, web3devdoc@gmail.com. You can find me on Twitter. I think web3devdoc.com is up. So I think it's got links to everything that's on there. I'm pretty easy to find. So if you need anything, let me know. I'm happy to collaborate on projects. Some of you kind of mentioned you may be willing to help with the UI stuff, which would be great. But if you're interested in playing around with it, like I said, I'm going to open source this. So if anybody wants to participate, add to it, let me know. We can make it better, faster.
Amazing. Okay, I also just shared your Twitter if anyone wants to stay up to date on what Zach's doing. Great. Zach, I cannot thank you enough for coming and share like this. I think what I thought, it's way more than what I thought it was. I guess I hadn't looked that deeply like this. I'm still wrapping my head around how you actually made this. It's very cool. I don't know, Drew, Mark, Dorian, had y'all considered that something at this level would be made like this?
I don't think I could make it. Like if I tried to do all this, I wouldn't be able to.
I mean,
I've spent way more time in JSON the last month than I probably the last 5 years of just reading through, just because it's JSON coming from the blockchain, it's JSON in the studio. So now I have 2 weeks that I have my students just do JSON assignments because they have to know how to read that stuff. They have to know how to use it, whether it's just the blockchain stuff or any of the web dev now. And so it's a pretty cool skill that they can learn. And now that they can see it all in Bildr, and once it clicks, it goes quickly, but it takes a little bit to click for a lot of people.
Yeah, it does.
Yeah, we definitely appreciate what you're doing for sure. You know, it's honestly, I know for, you know, like Dorian and I have thought about this for like a decade, pretty much, you know, in this kind of context. And when we started recreating Bildr, the reason we did it in this way was with this hope that this exact kind of thing would occur, right? Y'all are early, right? I mean, we haven't exposed any of this stuff really. We haven't put any documentation around it. So it's amazing to see it occurring right now. So awesome to see. And I know you know this, but anything we can do to support it, you know, we're here to help.
Well, thank you. The community is what's been helpful. If there wasn't all you guys out there to answer questions, I wouldn't make it through this. So I'll keep sharing and updating as we go through. And hopefully we see a lot of growth here in the next 6 months or so in this bear market of nothingness. Hopefully people are building stuff.
Excellent. Zach, one last question. The people want homework. Okay, they want to know, can they take your class anywhere? Are you planning on having any online courses?
So my course is not online publicly available, but I am in the middle of recording a 12-week online supplement for my course. And anything Bildr related, I will make sure to share and have you guys test and see early versions of that for the whole community. That will be open and available. I did get paid extra this summer to revamp my course for the fall. So I have to present it once in the fall and then I can open source everything. So in the winter, everything that I do in the fall will get released. In the Web3 space, the blockchain space, I throw away 75% of my course every semester because it moves so fast. So I've started just open sourcing a lot of that. So anything that I have, I dump it out. But all of my students get access to everything. So I have students that graduated in 2017 that are still emailing me and getting the new content so that they can continue to build those things. But I'll share with everybody as I put some things together. I'm fixing to do a lot more YouTube videos. around Bildr specifically. So one of the things for me was find a niche software. And I think this is it, and should give me enough of Web3 and Bildr that I'll start putting together a lot more YouTube videos here pretty soon.
Fantastic. Yeah, I can tell you'll already have a waiting list for your courses. So thank you for being so generous with your time today. And then you guys know where to follow up with Zach if you have any questions or want to help out with what he's working on. Excellent. So I think, let's see, let me look at the time. So it's almost 4:30, but we've got some time. I think we just had a few things to go through. Guys, you game?
Yep.
Yes? Okay, super. So let me go up. So George, it looks like you had a question on listing out all the styles that are used in a project so you can normalize duplicating them. I don't know if there's anything. I mean, you've got the style classes list, but that doesn't show you, does it show you what's in use? No, because it's got everything that's default from the
I
toolkit,
don't think
right?
so.
No, yeah.
Yeah, we can,
Maybe-
I mean,
No,
we
it
can
doesn't.
we could pretty easily show that in the UI. I swear that, Dorian, didn't we do that at one point? I swear, I thought I remembered on the class, like when you
Yeah, we
open
used
the
to
class, it
have
would
it.
show it, right?
Okay, feature
So-
request then.
When we did
Yeah.
version 2 of the style editor, I think we never brought that over.
We never moved it.
Mhm.
Oh,
Okay,
So
All right,
for-
so-
Yeah, basically I have my my tester guy. I'm like, hey, you know, we have 3 or 4 different workspaces within a given project, and a lot of them were imported from various other places. So every time you do that, you create copies and copies of different styles that do the same thing. One example is display none, right? So if you use the auth example that Drew did for SendGrid, that has its own set of styles that hide and show various things, utility classes. And there's no real easy way to say, hey, I just want to have one H2, I want to have one H3 that's everywhere, and be able to sort of figure out, even just a printout in JSON format would be worthwhile, or CSS or something. So I don't know, is there a way to list the
Yeah.
project out even as a text file or a .json file or something like that, where it could be manipulated to do show a report on a spreadsheet or some other kind of output where, maybe
yeah,
you write some, I don't know, some
yeah,
I like it
Python
as
or
a,
JavaScript code to,
yeah, I mean, I think what I would like to see is, so there's 2 things. One is similar to what we were talking about with Zach, where like just this ability to dump the entirety of a project out, because it's all just JSON. It's all just a bunch of entities that are in a NoSQL database that are all JSON. Like that's the whole thing.
Right.
But I wonder if there's something else that might be a good thing as well on anywhere where we have these different lists. Like this would be a good feature request to add in for a future release, would be like on every single list, just the ability to export the entire thing and just basically take it out as like a CSV with JSON inside of every column, because the way it's all stored is there's typically in all the entities, there's this column called options, and that options is where everything gets read from. It's just a JSON object with a whole bunch of other JSON inside of it.
Okay.
And so that's probably like, that would be I think that would be the best way to do it, because then you could just go into any list and you could pretty much, I mean, we already have this ability built in, like we have actions that just do this. It just takes it'll take a JSON, or it'll take anything and just export it. The other way you could do it.
so
I
there
wonder if
is already an action that will just
There's
take
an action,
all-
but it's not on those lists, so it would be a little more difficult. Dorian, couldn't we just like inspect on the grid row? I bet it has the options inside of the grid.
It does.
And just
no, you can get it from the cache either way,
yeah.
but it's complicated. You can
Well,
do
how
it.
about I just put it on
I
the
think I
feature
can do
request
it.
list? Okay, because
Instead
Karsh
of
needs some
architecting it
help.
now, yeah, but it's not.
Yeah.
Don't
I'll
give
put it.
us
Hey.
problems that we can't
mean-
solve. That's not cool.
I mean, it's
Yeah.
not a problem if we move it to next office hours or something, because
No.
Drew already answered it in the Discord channel, I think.
Well,
I'm not
let's
sure.
Partly.
Partly, yeah.
Partly. Okay. Is it something that you could show your project, Karsh, where we could see?
I mean, I can share it. Drew also has a collaborator.
I actually have
yeah.
a breakpoint on it already. If you want, it might be easier if I share.
Yeah. It's
Are we ready
just,
to go into that? Are we going?
Yes,
now?
because I have to stop these guys. They're gonna go figure this out. I'm just gonna go put this into feature requests because that's a great idea, George. So basically, if I've got it right, it's gonna be an export of any lists that you'd be able to have all the JSON in a column or something that you could then use.
Yeah, so that,
Okay.
it doesn't have to have a user interface. It could be just something that's a dump that could be put into Excel or
Okay.
numbers or something like that.
Okay, perfect. Okay, I shall add that to my list. Thank you.
Can't help
And then
myself.
I
I'll chat.
know.
I'll chat how to do it right. Like you can just inspect in the browser and you can get that JSON out. So at a minimum, you can get that. I'll chat into Discord how to do it. It's pretty straightforward. I just checked to make sure it was all there. It is there.
Okay, so Drew, Karsh, tell us what we're trying to troubleshoot here.
so basically, this is part two of what George asked about the URLs in couple of weeks ago in office hours. So it's basically what Mark explained and Drew how to do the back and forward buttons work and history push and stuff like that. So there's a bit of a problem there. I explained it in the chat. I mean the change switch action works. So if I put directly in the URL bar at the top, like page 1, page 2, it goes to that page, but the URL listener doesn't work. So if you try to go back, the forward button only works in one scenario. And if you try to go directly to the page, for example, page 2, it doesn't work anymore. And even in the first scenario where it works, it only changes the URL, but not the content on the page.
Okay, so Drew, what do you have here?
So at first, there's an event. I don't know if everyone remembers this whole process, but there's something where on page load, you put a listener action that listens for the URL to change. And then you run a condition switch that's going to read the URL and it's going to display the correct content based on the URL. So we were talking in Discord and we thought something was up with that listener. But what I have here is I have a breakpoint on that listener action here.
Yeah.
Whoops, I should remove it.
Yeah.
And let me just add it quick while I'm talking. And yeah, so we thought it wasn't firing, but actually I found out it was firing. It was just something when it reads the URL segment, it's reading it wrong. So maybe Mark or Dorian can catch something. Basically, I was doing this right before this office hours, so I didn't get to look into why it was reading that URL segment wrong yet. But I can do it like this. All right, so now, let me just refresh this. Now when it runs the condition switch, it checks the URL, it's gonna break here. And I can look at my input arguments. And so here's like the options. So it says, if it's page -1, you run this flow. If it's page -2, you run this flow. And so here it says the value is page 3. So that works. So if I continue here, this should load page 3, I guess, or I don't know. We actually just start it from fresh because there's kind of two problems in one. Yeah, so let me start from root first. So it read as page 2 here, which is actually incorrect. Something I think is up with how it's reading the URL.
I think it was
segment.
correct. I think you
I
were
think that
just
was right.
looking at the second value, which is the static value.
Wait, this time it didn't break. My. So yeah,
What?
I think point is it's something in the setup is just like slightly off, but
Can
I
you
didn't
show me-
quite get to figure it out.
Can you show me the actions on this one? Is this the same project that Karsh is working on? Is it a different
Yeah.
project? Okay.
It's a
Yeah,
test
this is
project.
his project. Yeah.
Okay, cool. Can you go to the page load here? I just want to make sure that I think I understand how you've got it set up. I just want to make sure. And the open page has the switch in it. Okay.
So this, yeah, open page and URL is the switch. It's reading segment 0 and doing the switch.
Yeah.
And then we also have that listener set up here for when the back or forward button is hit, it's going to run this open page on URL, which is the condition switch.
So the way that I normally do this is a little bit different. So go to the page load real quick. I think this could cause the scenario. So the run flow on URL is set to run that same open page on URL, right? If you click on the run flow on state change.
Yeah.
It's the
Okay.
same.
Yeah. So what I normally do is actually, if I remember right. Oh no, this is correct. I just do it in the opposite order. So what's the issue here? This should all be working. Yeah, I don't see any problem
Yep.
here.
Yeah,
Right,
that's
is
how
there anything else?
So let me just refresh this.
Oh, wait, what's inside your open page? In the open page, like open page 1,
These?
open page 2. Yeah, you're pushing the state, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
I even tried it pushing the state on page load on the other pages, but it didn't seem to make a difference.
I think you have to push the state too, right? Not just the URL. Let me I'm gonna see if I can find my
You mean like
project rep.
actually put something in here?
I think so. Let me sorry, let me find my project real quick because I had one
What I
that
had,
has this all
what I
set
had
up.
before, like brackets. But
Yeah,
I'm
I
not
mean
sure
that's
if
usually
it
what I do
worked.
is just empty brackets for the state. I don't think it's I mean I don't think in JavaScript it's required. I don't know, maybe it messes something up in here. What I was saying before, so like it does work visually when you're switching these pages. I might have a little slow internet, it's still loading. But like when I go page 1, page 2, page 3, it works. And then the back buttons are switching the correct URL. It just wasn't actually switching the page content. And when I broke on it and looked, in that condition switch function, the value was always blank. It was basically saying the URL segment was always blank.
Yeah. Can you
I don't know
try
what's up with it right now.
And I want to debug
Yes.
too.
There it goes.
Go ahead.
So yeah, look, value's blank here.
Which is right. That's correct on this one because the value is
Yep.
blank right now.
Yeah.
Yep. Page
So-
2. It doesn't break here when I click page 2. That's peculiar, right? Or no?
No,
'Cause I have it-
and run the page load, right?
I don't know
Well,
what
no,
you're breaking on.
I'm breaking on this right here. This one. This condition switch.
And when you
So
click
when I
on
click-
page 2, it's running
Oh,
that.
here we go. Well, this is because it's just opening page 1. That's why that's not.
This is
running.
different than how I do it. I think this is probably why.
This is probably what's
um,
causing it.
Yeah, so the way that I have done this in the past is when I click open page 1, the open page 1 flow, all it does is changes the state. That's it. It doesn't open the page or anything because the listener is going to go open the page. I bet what's happening is both things are occurring. So you're like, you're clicking that button, it opens the page, then it sets the state, and then the listener tries to open the page again from the state. And I bet there's some race condition things happening there in JavaScript in the browser when that occurs. So it's like, this is what I was trying to remember and I couldn't remember, like there's something wrong here about I do this a little different. So what it is on the open page 1 action, that flow, all I do is push the state. So
Can
I
we
have,
try that? Can we remove the open page and see if it works? I mean,
So-
actually, it makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
Do you
there's
mind if I just
basically-
delete it right now?
well, but if you delete it,
Yeah,
it
yeah.
won't do
Just delete
anything.
it. Yeah.
You got to have two sets of flows.
Yeah,
One
copy
for
that and move it.
yeah. So you have one set of flows that's for like change state, and then you have another set of flows that's open page, right? And the change state is what happens when you click page 1, page 2, page 3. That just changes the state in the or changes the the URL.
URL.
And then the listener runs the flows of the open page flows that only do the open page side. And basically you're just kind of like separation of concerns kind of thing. And I bet it's something to do with some sort of conditions, or I don't know what the browser does when that happens, because you're kind of like, you're sort of like doing it twice, kind of, I guess.
It actually makes sense.
So like change state page 1, just change the state, open page 1 opens.
Yeah. And on page URL, it should be doing the open page, right? Yeah. So that's good.
Yeah.
And then on the click of page 1, it should do the change state page 1. Yeah, like that. I think if you set it up that way for all of them, it'll work all the way through, and it'll push the state back and forth, and the back and forward button should work. But you'll probably have to do it to all of them. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah. To be able to actually test.
I'm just gonna see if I can do this and go back. It's probably pointless.
Yeah, I think it'll
No,
be
it
kind of
didn't
weird.
open. Yeah, it didn't open the page. It just changed the URL.
Then
Yeah,
the
'cause I think
listener's not functioning there.
That listener. Yeah, I don't know actually. Because what if I instead?
This is exactly how I set it up.
This
like
is how you
this.
set it up.
Can you go to the page load
I
one
could
more
nest
time?
that, Yeah, okay.
No, you don't want to, because
Yeah.
you shouldn't need to. The process should be, I change the URL, the listener sees that change, runs the condition, opens the correct page, and that way you're running the same exact flow, whether it's like coming from page load or coming from the click or whatever.
Yeah, I think the listener not working. Maybe that's the problem.
Yeah, the listener must not be set right here somehow.
I mean, it's
Like,
set because like I was breaking on it and it was going. It was listening.
Can you grab
know what I
that
mean?
action ID and put a breakpoint on that one? So I bet
On
this
this one?
isn't, it's never firing, right?
Or it's getting,
I
it's like
thought it was
exiting or
firing, but
something.
I wasn't breaking on this action. I was breaking on the one that's inside of it.
Yeah.
So if I break on it here, let me see if it'll break without refreshing.
Well, no, it won't, because that's just when it
Page
sets the
load.
listener. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, you can't really break on the listener executing, you know what I mean? You can only do it on, like, right here is where it's setting the listener.
Yeah, I mean, it's got the action ID in there, right?
Yeah.
I think it's setting it.
Yeah, that should be working. I'd probably need to debug this with Darrell, who wrote this action, to see what's going on. Maybe, I mean, it did do it there though.
That was on page load that time. Like if I click back on page 1, it's not actually opening it. I feel like it's close, but yeah, it needs like a little, there's something just like slightly off in there.
Yeah, it's like when the URL changes, it's not triggering the condition.
Something's happening with this. It's the listener though that's doing it. Something's wrong in there. Could you
do it with a
add me-
default one, or do you change anything? Like you use all the default actions, right? Because there is a way you can replace state or you can push state, and they're different, but that's not
I'm pretty sure it was
factoring in here.
put. I'm pretty sure that how you have it set is exactly how.
Well, you would know if you customize an action, then that's what I'm asking. If you don't customize an action when you build like this, then
Oh no, I don't.
Okay,
No, I don't
yeah,
change anything. And I'll see if I can find the last project I did that has this in it, and it worked fine.
I don't think I can add you, right? Because I'm not owner.
Yeah, I can just give me the.
Yeah, he's Mark at Bildr.
Hey y'all, Alex is asking if it was, remember he had an issue with the data listener and we couldn't figure it out. I wonder if it's a similar thing. Do you remember, Dorian? I think you and I were trying to help him figure that out.
Yeah, but that's different. This isn't a data listener. This is just adding a listener to look at the change of the URL, not actual data. Yeah.
Okay. All right.
So
So
did you get the invitation? Sorry, Cora.
Yeah, I'll check. Let's see. Yep.
And then Mark, are
Great.
you wanting to go check this out with Darrell and then we'll get back to Karsh?
Yeah, give me till
Okay.
tomorrow morning. I'll get on with Darrell in the morning. He's
Sure.
in Europe, so it's like 1 a.m. his time. So I'll work with him tomorrow morning my time, and then I'll chat you in the
Okay.
Discord.
Yeah,
In the
great.
meantime, should Karsh go make all of the changes we talked about for the other pages?
I'll actually go set it up.
I
But
can
before I give
wait.
it to Darrell, I'll go in there and set it up how I think it should be working. And if it, maybe I'll find something else that we were missing in the video or in the, in the demo today. But if not, then tomorrow morning I'll get on with Darrell and we'll figure it out.
Okay.
For sure,
Yeah.
there's something wrong though. This should absolutely be working. It looks like how I set it up now.
Okay, cool.
Cool.
All right. I think that was it. We did have one
Thanks,
last
guys.
question. Oh, thank you,
Yeah, no
Karsh.
problem.
About how to handle, actually, let me look at the time. Are you guys, can we do another 5 minutes? Or if not, we can, okay,
I
cool.
can do 5. Yeah.
Okay, cool. Let's see if we can just talk through George's question from Discord, which was how to handle multi-valued attributes, checkboxes, and mutual exclusion attributes, radio buttons. Is there anything we can do in 5 minutes for that, or should we?
I mean, I don't know if there's a specific part of that you want to know, but it's like the way that you handle an HTML is the same as it gets handled in Bildr. So I'm sure we can answer it, but it depends exactly what the specific scenario is, I guess.
Are there any examples anywhere where you actually do in any of the, I haven't found anything where there's radio buttons, for example.
Yeah.
Or
I mean, I haven't-
checkboxes?
Multiple checkboxes,
Yeah. Like if you use a radio button, I barely use them in HTML. That's probably why there's not a good example. But if you use a radio button, you give it a name and the value is whichever one is checked. So it's like in Bildr, when you say get value or set value, it's going to do the same things that it would do with other elements, but specific to the radio button. It's like just conceptually. So, it should be as simple as having a name on that element and it'll have a value. When someone selects a specific radio button, the value will be whichever one's selected.
So it does it, but it doesn't automatically mutex them, or it doesn't automatically shut off the other. So there's no
On
like
radio
container
buttons,
for the radio buttons. Does it?
There
on radio
is.
buttons, it will. Jeez, hummingbirds like attacking me out here.
Yeah, I think you have to group the radio button into, there's some sort of group. I don't remember the syntax.
I think you just have to use the same name on the radio button.
Is that
Like
what it
the actual
is?
name attribute has to be the same. And then however many
He
radio
says
buttons
you need
put
to
in.
group it. So
Yeah.
it looks like Jeroen
God.
actually
It's
used
been a
these in the
while.
marketplace. And he has some
Cool.
examples he can share, George. So
Oh,
Jeroen,
perfect.
coming in and saving the
saving
day.
the day.
Yeah, I
Which,
remember there was
by
some
the way-
grouping.
Which, by the way, he is going to be on next office hours sharing his plugin. So we're just going to get a bunch of awesomeness this week and next week. So I think what I'll do is I'll go ahead and wrap it, y'all, because I know we've got a little over and you guys probably want to go enjoy your evenings or mornings. But again, thank you so much to Zach for coming and taking his time to share what he worked on and made. It's incredible. You'll have his information and I chatted out the link. I'll share it again in Discord with the recording of this session. And then tune in next week for Junix sharing his marketplace plugin. So thank y'all so much. Have a wonderful rest of your day.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
Bye.
Bye.